The first thing Sergeant Nel Kavern did when he stepped off the shuttle onto the rocky surface of Rhelor Five was pull a battered thermos from the side pouch of his rucksack, flip the lid, and take a long, reverent sip. His eyes closed. He sighed. 3 alien soldiers watched from behind a pile of scavenged alloys, their glimmering oculars narrowing in unison. "It drinks. Something black," murmured Unit Commander Threx, his voice filtered through his translator collar. His armor hissed as he took a cautious step forward. Nel opened one eye and met their gaze. "Relax. It's coffee." "My lifeblood." The trio didn't move. Nel leaned back on a crate, raising the thermos for another sip. "You guys don't have anything like this?" The smallest of the 3, Scout Class Finner, shook his head. "It is an opaque substance. Volatile, perhaps. Poisonous. For most things, yeah. For me, it's the only reason I'm vertical right now." Colonel Brand had warned Nel that the Rhelorian soldiers were cautious, slow to trust, and extremely analytical. He hadn't expected that to extend to his caffeine habits. Threx gestured, and Finu approached cautiously, scanning the thermos with a handheld device. The device let out a confused chirp. No known compound matches. High acidity. Caffeine detected. Unknown interaction with carbon-based systems. Nel grinned. "It's brewed from roasted beans. Grows on Earth. Bitter, hot, and keeps you from smashing your head into a wall when you've been up for 36 hours. Fenner looked to Threx. "It is. Recreational?" "No," Nel said quickly, "it's survival. You think I'm joking, but I've seen men hold off sleep for 72 hours on this stuff. I once watched a guy disarm a proximity mine while chugging an espresso. He was shaking like crazy, but the mine didn't go off." Threx's eyes widened. "And this? Coffee gives your kind this ability." Nel took another swig. "Not always. Sometimes we just get heart palpitations. But it's worth it." The aliens stared at him for several seconds more before returning to their duties, muttering in their own tongue. Nel capped the thermos and slung his rifle back over his shoulder. The outpost was crumbling, its metal walls rusted and pockmarked. The mission was simple: joint patrol with the Rhelorian soldiers, clear out any remaining rebel drones, and secure the comms tower before sunset. Nothing fancy, except now Threx kept glancing at his thermos like it might explode. Nel caught up to him as they crossed the shattered causeway. "You keep looking like that, and I'm going to start charging admission." Threx responded without turning. "Your physiology is inefficient, yet you persist. You rely on this substance to maintain function." Nel nodded. "We adapt. Even if it means living off bitter bean juice." They reached the edge of the tower compound. Funner swept a scanner across the doorway. Movement inside. 2 units. Hostile. Threx readied his weapon. Standard breach. Cavern, flank left. Nel moved without hesitation, circling around the crumbling wall. As he set position, he felt the familiar buzz of caffeine, keeping his mind sharp. The breach was swift. Threx kicked in the panel, Funner entered low, and Nel swept in from the side. 2 drones clicked to life, their arms raising. Nel fired first, a short burst into the core of the nearest machine. Funner's shot followed half a second later, disabling the second unit with a sparking hiss. The room fell silent. "I thought these were decommissioned," Nel said, lowering his rifle. "They were," Threx answered. "But rebels scavenge, reprogram." Funner knelt by the drone. "Crude work. Effective." Nel leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "Glad I topped off on coffee." Threx turned to him. "Your reliance on this drink concerns me." "It's not a crutch," Nel said. "It's a tool." "Like your translators or Funner's scanner." Threx considered that. "Then let us understand it." By the end of the day, Nel was sitting in the makeshift mess tent, surrounded by Rhelorian soldiers. His thermos sat in the center of the table like a ceremonial artifact. "I'm telling you," Nel said, "it's simple. You grind the beans, pour hot water over them, and let it drain. That's a basic drip. There are other methods. French press, AeroPress, espresso machine, though I doubt we'll find one out here." Threx tapped the thermos with a claw. "You consume this daily?" "Every morning. Sometimes midday. Occasionally at night, if I'm on watch. It's habit and necessity." Another soldier, Tactical Officer Marn, leaned in. "You mentioned a buzz." Nel chuckled. "Yeah, it sharpens the mind. Speeds things up. But if you drink too much, you crash hard or get jittery." Funner blinked. "You ingest something that destabilizes your neural balance purposefully?" Nel shrugged. We don't always have the luxury of perfect choices. Sometimes you need to stay awake in a trench or keep your hands steady while wiring a charge. Coffee helps. Threx stood. We must attempt replication. It took 2 days. Nel worked with their quartermaster to source anything resembling beans. They found a local plant whose seeds roasted well enough, though the flavor was closer to dirt than Colombian roast. Still, it had caffeine analogs. With a jury-rigged hot plate, a metal mesh filter, and a borrowed kettle, Nel brewed a small pot. The smell alone drew a crowd. Rhelorian noses twitched. Some recoiled. Others leaned closer. Threx stepped forward. I will taste it. Nel poured a small cup. Careful. It's strong. Threx tilted the cup and sipped. He froze. It is unpleasant, he said. Yeah, Nel said. Most people hate their first cup. Threx took another sip. But I feel alert. That's the magic. By the end of the week, half the Rhelorian unit was sipping crude coffee variants during patrols. The other half watched in confused horror. Then came the ambush. Nel was leading a 3-man patrol with Threx and Funner when the cliffs above erupted with plasma fire. The first blast vaporized the comms relay behind them. The second hit the rock near Nel's feet, throwing him backward. He hit the ground hard, his shoulder slamming against a jagged outcrop. Cover! Threx shouted, dragging Nel behind a fallen girder. Nel gritted his teeth. His arm was limp. Pain bloomed across his side. Shoulder, he gasped. I think it's dislocated. Threx ripped open his mekit. Can you move it? Nel tried. Agony shot through him. No. Then we relocated. Finner positioned himself behind Nel, pressing down on his legs. Ready? Threx asked. No. Threx pulled. Nel screamed. The joint snapped back into place. His vision blurred. You will not fight like this, Threx said. I can shoot left-handed, Nel muttered. You are not left-handed. I'll manage. The enemy fire intensified. Threx passed him a stim patch. This dulls pain. You must still rest. Give me 10 minutes, Nel said. Then I'm back in. They held position. Nel sipped from his thermos with shaking hands, the bitter liquid grounding him. His side throbbed, his shoulder ached, but his mind cleared. Coffee again, Funner noted. Helps me focus, Nel said. You are damaged. Yeah, but I'm still here. Reinforcements arrived 20 minutes later. The ambush was repelled, but Nel's arm was immobilized, and he was grounded for the next week. The med tech confirmed a partial tear in the rotator cuff. No fracture, but movement would be limited for a while. He spent recovery in the field tent, watching the Rhelorian soldiers experiment with their own brews. Some added local herbs. Others tried cold extractions. Funner even attempted a double roast. You've started a movement, Brant said when she visited. I just showed them what kept me going, Nel replied. You did more than that. You built trust. With beans. He smiled faintly. Just doing my part. Outside, Threx handed a steaming cup to a patrolman. The soldier winced at the taste, then nodded. Nel leaned back, letting the pain meds dull his shoulder. He took a long drink from his thermos. It wasn't home. It wasn't perfect. But it was coffee. And somehow, that made it enough. 3 days after the ambush, Nel was back on his feet, though his arm remained strapped against his torso in a rigid sling. The med-techs had wrapped his shoulder in a cooling gel sleeve that pulsed slightly every few minutes, releasing a slow stream of anti-inflammatory agents. Movement was limited to neck turns and occasional finger stretches. Anything more and he'd risk tearing the sutures. You should still be in the cot, Corporal Hesse muttered as she handed him a data slate. Being horizontal for another day might kill me faster than the shoulder will, Nel replied, leaning against a stabilizer beam in the command tent. Physically, you're barely operational. Mentally, you're feral. Got it. Appreciate the concern, Corporal. Hesse rolled her eyes and returned to the comms relay. The Rhelorian liaison team had rotated out that morning, replaced by a fresh unit led by a tactician named Kethen. Unlike Threx, Kethen wore a full mask with no visible features and spoke only when absolutely necessary. When he arrived, he'd stared at Nel's injured arm and said, flatly, your species has no backup limbs. Kinda short on spares, Nel had replied. Now, as the sun dipped behind the jagged ridge east of the compound, Nel stepped outside to watch the new Rhelorian unit arrange perimeter drones in a staggered formation. Their machines hovered silently, casting long shadows across the gravel. One of the soldiers, a tall one with intricate glyphs etched into his armor plates, approached with a deliberate gait. He stopped 2 paces from Nel and tilted his head slightly. You are the one who neutralized 2 drones with impaired coordination? Technically, I was still coordinated. Just lopsided. I am Vorthin. I have read your injury report. Nel gave a half nod. Then I guess you know I'll be useless in a sprint for another week. Vorthin didn't respond immediately. Then, your bones knit slowly. This is inefficient. Yeah, well, we don't regrow limbs or slap on nanogel and walk it off. Is that a complaint or a boast? Depends if you're offering upgrades. Vorthin twitched his upper crest. I'm evaluating your unit's compatibility for integrated patrol patterns. Tactical synchronization will be limited with a wounded member. You want me benched? I want you where you are most useful. You are not useful if you collapse halfway through a skirmish. Nel tapped the side of his sling. I can still analyze movement patterns. Map drone behavior. You want me off my feet. Put me on recon review. Vorthin stared at him for several seconds without blinking. Then he extended a data node. Nel took it with his good hand. You will process the last 6 hours of patrol footage. Focus on southeast quadrant. Use infrared overlays. Report anomalies within 1 rotation. Done. Back in the tent, Nel propped the slate on a metal crate and settled into a folding chair. As the feed played, he adjusted the spectral filters and watched a slow parade of thermal signatures crawl across the terrain. Most were ambient wildlife, small, low-profile creatures that glowed faintly against the colder rock. But one segment, 37 minutes into the 3rd feed, caught his attention. A faint trail of heat shifted behind a mineral deposit, too slow and too deliberate for native fauna. He isolated the frames, enhanced the resolution, and marked the coordinates. By dusk, Kethin had called a briefing. Nel stood at the edge of the table, arms crossed, sling tucked tight. We have confirmed thermal drift along the southern plateau, Kethin said. Lieutenant Kavern flagged the anomaly. It does not match known environmental variables. Vorthin turned toward him. You believe it to be a scout. Could be cloaked, could be shielded. Either way, it's moving slower than a drone and more erratically than wildlife. Might be checking our blind spots. Kethin gestured to the map. We'll send an intercept team. Kavern, you'll coordinate from base. Copy that. 2 hours later, the recon squad returned with a half-disassembled probe, its outer casing scorched and warped. The internal memory core was intact, though encrypted. Hessa handed it to Nel. If you're bored, try breaking into this. Nothing says recovery like unauthorized decryption. You're not authorized for much else right now. He brought the core back to his cot and set up a bypass rig. Manual decryption was slow, but the probe's design shared structural similarities with older rebel tech. Nel traced the access nodes, bypassed 2 dummy firewalls, and tripped a 3rd one that launched a diagnostic loop. He let the loop run while he examined the heat signature logs. One entry stood out, a ping from 2 days prior, registering a brief spike in EM radiation near the cliffside. Not natural. Not ours. He tagged it and filed a report. Midway through the night, he was woken by a low-frequency hum beneath his cot. At first, he thought it was a generator spike. Then the lights flickered. Outside, someone shouted. He shoved himself upright, grimacing as his sling shifted. Hessa burst in a moment later. Something's jamming the north relay. Nel grabbed his boots. How bad? We've lost uplink with the outer drones. Manual override's dead too. Sabotage, or a new interference pulse. They moved through the corridor toward the relay station. Vorthin was already there, examining the panel with 4 other soldiers. Sparks flickered from the access port. Nel knelt beside the panel and ran his hand along the casing. This wasn't fried from the outside. Look at the scoring. Someone melted from within. There were no intrusions on this node, Vorthin said. Then someone planted something inside it before we got here. Kethin arrived, removing his mask for the first time. His face was smooth, pale, with small, deep-set eyes that flicked between Nel and the panel. Can you isolate the signal? I can try. If it's still broadcasting, we'll need a directional trace. Do it. And if you find another breach point, I want it quarantined. Back in the comms tent, Nel patched into the remaining nodes and began scanning for residual pulses. He moved slowly, fingers stiff from cold and fatigue, his shoulder throbbing with each movement. After 20 minutes, he found a faint harmonic echo barely above ambient noise, pulsing at irregular intervals. Hessa, he called, give me a triangulation on this frequency. Use the southeast relay and the tower repeater. She worked quickly, pulling up topographical overlays and marking the signal origin. It's reflecting off the ridge face, she said. Elevation's wrong for a drone. It's stationary. Could be a buried transmitter. Or a relay hub. Nel stared at the screen. We need a ground team. Quiet, fast. No radio chatter. Vorthen re-entered. Coordinates. Nel pointed. Here. You'll need to move under thermal dampeners. I assume you will remain here. I'll be monitoring the signal. If it shifts, I'll redirect you. Vorthen nodded once and turned to leave. As the team deployed, Nel watched the signal pulse continue at its steady rhythm. He pulled his sling tighter, swallowed a pain inhibitor, and leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen. 30 minutes later, the signal vanished. Not faded, not jammed. Gone. Nel stood, pain shooting down his side. Something's wrong, he said. Hessa looked up. They're not due to report for another 10. They won't. It's a trap. He slung his rifle across his back, awkwardly adjusting for the sling. Hessa blocked the doorway. You're not cleared for field. They walked into a dead zone. If we wait, we lose them. You can barely lift your arm. I've got one good hand and a locator beacon. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Nel stepped into the night, the air cold and sharp, stars stretched across the sky in unfamiliar patterns. The pain was worse now, but he pushed through it, moving fast across the gravel. The ridge loomed ahead, shadowed and silent. He reached the outcrop and ducked low, scanning for movement. Nothing. No lights. No chatter. Then, a faint glint of reflection. He crept closer, boots crunching lightly. Behind a split boulder, he found one of Vorthen's team, unconscious, helmet cracked. No blood, just a thin trail of coolant leaking from the suit's vent. He checked the pulse steady. He activated the emergency beacon and waited. Within minutes, the evac team arrived. The rest of the squad was found deeper in the ridge hollow, dazed but alive. The transmitter had been rigged with a flash pulse neurological disruptor tuned to Rhelorian neural patterns. Only Nel, with his incompatible biology, had been unaffected. Back at camp, Kethen studied the device. It was designed to disable us. Not you. Guess I'm good for something after all. You are a flawed design, Kethen said, but inconveniently resistant to targeted disruption. Nel sat on the edge of the bunk, exhausted, shoulders screaming. Welcome to humanity. Kethen stared at him for a moment longer, then nodded. No wonder you need that black liquid. Nel opened his eyes to a dim yellow glow filtering through the tense fabric. His shoulder pulsed with a dull ache, now familiar but no less irritating. The sling had loosened overnight, and he adjusted it gently, biting down on a hiss when the strap grazed the edge of the healing tier. Outside, someone was testing propulsion thrusters short. Controlled bursts echoed across the compound. He sat up slowly, reached for the canteen at his side, and took a swig. The water was tepid and metallic, but it washed down the chalky aftertaste of the anti-inflammatories. Across the tent, Corporal Hessa was hunched over a console with a tangle of fiber cables looped around her wrist. You slept longer than usual, she said without looking up. That's what happens when you don't get woken up by exploding relays or alien brain zappers. They pinned the transmitter's origin to an old mining shaft. Empty now. Any sign of who planted it? Scans showed partial footprints. Some prints match Rebel exoframes, but the depth suggests someone lighter made the final placement. So, a collaborator. Maybe. Or a prisoner forced to do it. Nel swung his legs over the cot and stood, careful to keep his right side motionless. Has Vorthen said anything? He's out calibrating the ridge sensors. Kethen's in the tower, reviewing orbital logs. Nel pulled on his jacket one-handed and stepped outside. The air was dry, with a faint chemical tang left by the nightly mist condensers. Patrols moved briskly between checkpoints, the Rhelorian soldiers now wearing thermal dampeners integrated directly into their armor. A few of them had started wearing harness pouches modeled after Nel's gear, each with a small flask hooked to the front strap. He walked to the medical tent for his checkup. The Rhelorian medic, Dr. Yer, greeted him with a curt nod and motioned for him to sit on the exam bench. A scanner passed over his shoulder with a soft hum. The tear has closed, Yer said. Ligament fibers are regenerating, slower than expected. You favor the arm too much. I'm not exactly eager to rip it open again. Begin passive movement today. No load bearing. If you favor the left side longer, your gait will realign improperly. Nel stared at the ceiling while you applied a cooling wrap and set a timer on the adhesive regulator. Any more flash pulses? No. Then I'll consider that progress. He left the tent and made his way to the tower. The climb was slow, 2 ladders, then a spiral ramp. At the top, Kethin stood in front of a bank of monitors, hands clasped behind his back. You're recovering, Kethin said. Thanks for noticing. We cross-referenced orbital scans from the last 10 rotations. One ship entered Rhelor airspace briefly, camouflaged by a solar flare. It didn't land. A drop from low orbit? Kethin nodded. Likely a payload drone, possibly with a manual override system to guide the transmitter into place. Any identification? No registry. No known configuration. Nel looked at the feed. The ship was a blur, barely visible against the flare's corona. Looks like someone's trying too hard to stay invisible. Or they only needed to be seen by one side. Vorthin entered, his armor streaked with red dust. The ridge is secured, he said. We found debris from a signal amplifier. Burned out. Purposeful detonation. They're covering tracks, Nel muttered. If they're this careful, they won't try anything again until they're ready. We must assume they intend to return, Vorthin said. Nel glanced between them. Then we need to give them a reason to think we're not worth the effort. Later that afternoon, Nel stood in the storage bay, examining a pile of scrap metal. He waved over Hessa and pointed at a half-melted drone chassis. Still got the optical emitter in there? Barely. It's fused to the housing. Good. We'll need to rig it to a motion sensor and a pulse generator. I wanted to look like we're recalibrating the perimeter. What for? We're going to broadcast fake signal spikes. Make it look like we're reinforcing the wrong sectors. If someone's still listening, they'll think we're clueless. Hessa grabbed a toolkit. Give me 90 minutes. By early evening, they had 4 decoy emitters planted across the northern ridge. Each one sent out irregular pulses, mimicking diagnostic chatter. Vorthin's team monitored the response frequencies. After 2 hours, a faint ping came back not from orbit, but from a satellite relay that wasn't supposed to be active. Nel stood in the control tent, watching the signal trace. They're still listening, he whispered. The next morning, Kethin called for a full debrief. All personnel gathered outside the tower. The Rhelorian soldiers formed a tight arc, helmets clasped under one arm. Human staff stood scattered, bleary-eyed but alert. Kethin raised a hand. We have confirmed the enemy is monitoring our systems. Lieutenant Kavern's decoy plan has forced a response. We will use this. He turned to Nel. Your physiology is not compatible with their neural disruptors. This makes you the only viable candidate for proximity infiltration. Nel blinked. Say that again. You will carry a false data core into the transmitter relay. Once activated, it will simulate a high-value data burst. When they attempt to intercept it, we trace the signal's return path. You want me to be bait? You are uniquely qualified. Nel crossed his arms. I'm also partially disabled. You will not be alone. Vorthin stepped forward. I will accompany you. My suit has been modified. Nel stared at him. You're volunteering? I do not rely on coffee, but I understand the logic of calculated risk. 3 hours later, the two of them crouched behind a jagged outcrop near the old mining shaft. The transmitter relay glowed faintly, half buried under broken stone. Nel's sling had been replaced with a semi-rigid brace that held his arm firm but allowed controlled movement. You sure this fake core won't fry us both? Nel asked. It emits a false heat signature and encrypted data stream. No actual transmission. Good. I've had enough surprises lately. They approached the relay together. Vorthin kept his weapon low, scanning the ground for pressure plates. Nel slid the data core into the transmitter's access port. A soft chime echoed once, then stopped. He glanced at Vorthin. Now we wait. Minutes passed. Then the air shifted a faint whine, barely audible. Nel looked up. A drone shimmered into view, its cloaking field failing mid-hover. It descended slowly, scanning the area with a violet beam. Vorthin raised his rifle, but Nel waved him off. Let it scan. We wanted to take the bait. The drone circled once, then zipped upward, disappearing into the clouds. Back at the tower, Kethin greeted them with a nod. The drone linked to an orbital relay. We followed the signal to a position outside Rhelor's orbit. And, Nel asked, we launched a probe to intercept. It attached a signal tether. We tracked the ship to a staging area near the asteroid belt. Nel exhaled. So that's where they're hiding. They're not hiding anymore. The signal was rerouted. They know we found them. Nel turned to Vorthin. Think they'll come back? They will find another target, one less inconvenient. As dusk settled over the compound, Nel sat on a crate outside the barracks, sipping from a cup filled with something that vaguely resembled coffee. Vorthen stood nearby, helmet tucked under one arm. "You did not panic," Vorthen said. "I've had root canals scarier than that drawn. Your methods are erratic, but they provoke results." High praise from someone who called me inefficient. I revised my assessment. "Glad to hear it." Vorthen extended a small container. Inside were dried leaves and a folded note written in Rhelorian script. "This is for steeping. We call it serif. It stimulates neural clarity." Nel sniffed the leaves. They smelled like a mix between mint and ozone. "I'll give it a shot. But I'm not giving up coffee. We can coexist." As the stars emerged overhead, the compound settled into silence. The relay hummed steadily, untouched. The perimeter sensors glowed soft blue. For the first time in weeks, nothing was broken, jammed, or on fire. Nel leaned back, winced slightly at the pull on his shoulder, and took another sip. Maybe peace wasn't permanent. Maybe it wasn't even likely. But for now, it was real. And that was enough.